let's dive into the next standard set of Magic the Gathering with the first one this year, AETHERDRIFT. Comes in fast.
Does come in fast. Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about, actually it has no Tokyo Drift vibe. I think Neon Dynasty had more of a Tokyo, or more like a cyberpunk vibe, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think this is more of a sort of a bit of a Star Wars pod racing.
Yeah, I think that fits.
Yeah, it's a mashup of a couple of different kind of inspirations. I think it's a pretty cool theme, and I really like returning to old planes and old characters coming back into Magic, new iterations of legends and new iterations of kind of mechanics we've had before.
And some new mechanics, as always. We have a new, more or less fancy one. We will get to that later. But let's have a look at the first card.
Yeah.
Which is
a new iteration of an old kind of card type, the Gearhulk. So we have this is the allied color of the Gearhulks, and it's the Brightglass Gearhulk.
Right. So in total there are 5 for each color combination. We will talk about this one because I think it will probably be the most impactful. Also, I don't want to say the most interesting one. I also think that the Dimir one is interesting in the right shell, but I think this one has the most impact because I, for myself, will definitely give it a try in Tymna Thrasios. Over there, you can find various combo pieces for either Nadoing or devoted druiding your opponent out of the game. You can find Shuko, you can find Swift of Reconfiguration. You can even find Urza Saga, which doesn't make that much sense if you can go for the artifacts directly, but yeah. You can also go for Nomad, by the way. It gives a land drop, sure. In the worst case, it gives a land drop. But you find Nomad, you find your mothers, whatsoever. So this card is pretty good. And in itself, yes, it's an artifact creature, but it has First Strike and Trample. Not the worst body, to be fair. Casting cost, double pip, might be a bit hard from time to time. But since the deck is, or most decks are designed in a way that they cast mostly white and green spells. So, or like, let's say the previous decks we saw online are basically banned with a black splash, only playing Bowmaster, Frog, and Demonic Tutor, something like this. So the mana base is leaning a bit into blue in addition because you have to cast your commander, of course. But then it's mostly Zelesnya, so this should be fine, I think.
Yeah, I think especially with like Spell Seeker into Neoform, into Brightglass Gearhulk can get you quite a few, like sets up very well for quite a few combo lines. Also, Eldritch Evolution into it is pretty good. It's green, so it can be Green Sun Zenith for. So it's like that. Along those lines, it's very good, as well as presenting a pretty good body.
You could even, that is true, I agree on the body. You could even, doesn't make a lot of sense again, but you could even E-tutor for it. If you're looking for a big body on board, maybe in some situations that's a thing that you're aiming at, and then you have a body. You could also directly search the combo pieces, of course, but
then again, if you're hellbent or something, it's probably better to go for, like, if you have no other cards in hand and an E-tutor, you go Brightglass Gearhulk, and you get 2 combos.
Yeah.
And then any tutor you draw will probably provide you a line to another combo.
Yeah.
It's pretty good, and it gets you kind of redundancy in that case as well.
Absolutely. Next up, we go over to a card that you are quite excited about, I would say.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty excited for this card. I've put together a list which is kind of like a control-based Valakut list. I'm not sure how good that is. I don't think it's that good, but I really like the thought of having this commander that you can. I mean, an Ancestral Recall and a Lightning Bolt is pretty good. I'm not sure how relevant the ramp ability will be, but kind of in that shell, you are usually going to be casting your commander once or twice in a game. If you like get to 6 mana, and if you're ramping, you can maybe get to 6 mana on turn 2 or turn or turn 5, and then you get to play your commander, refuel your hand, and play out of a pretty strong advantage from there, which is sort of like what Atraxa does. And Atraxa is obviously better at refueling your hand, and in a lot of other situations it's better. It kind of puts an end to most aggro decks and once it resolves. So that's kind of better on that case, but this comes down earlier and you get to commit a bit more to the lands game plan than you do in Atraxa, because in Atraxa you have to stay alive for a long time until you can cast Atraxa, maybe with counter backup and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the Teemo card pool is definitely worse than
Of
the
course.
4-color card pool.
Yeah.
That's that Atraxa has access to. But I also think it's an interesting card and would be cool to see some people experiment with it, including you. Maybe we will show it on the channel if you come up with a decent list that we can present. Let's see.
Yeah.
Next up, there is the Transit Mage, which is a great addition to the cycle, so to say, we already have. So we have the Trophy Mage for CMC 1 or less. Then we have no, it's not the Trinket Mage is the one for CMC 1 or less, right?
Yep. Then there's Tribute Mage.
Tribute Mage. And Trophy Mage was CMC 3.
Yep.
So too many mages after all. Here we have a mage for CMC 4 or 5. Now, some people might say that's not too relevant. The only interaction that we came up with, or that might be useful, is to search for Chain Veil in Teferi. Apart from that, maybe at some point we get some mono blue artifact combo deck that does something with Paradox Engine, for example.
Yeah.
Until then, I think we can just be happy to have that card. And that there's even a one that searches for CMC 6 and more, right?
Treasure Mage, yes.
Treasure Mage, right, exactly. So we basically have all the mages. This was the final one to
the cycle, because Treasure Mage gets 6 and above. So this one completes
the cycle, exactly, or the collection, if you so will. Then we have a card that is pretty hyped for CEDH, as far as I know. And I think it might be interesting for Duel Commander. I personally tried to bring up a list, but I quickly stopped because I think this card has lots of limitations for Duel Commander. Yeah. Yet again, I'm not sure if you think you found the perfect list or a good list. I'm happy to see what people brought up. The thing here, as you can read the card, I would imagine you want to have a CMC1 discard outlet, something like Padrid Imp or the Cookbook and stuff like this.
Or Frog.
CMC2 or Frog. Frog is already CMC2. So just like for the perfect lineup, you have CMC1 discard outlet, CMC2 cast Hashaton, CMC3 you can discard your threat, make a copy, and enjoy your pseudo reanimation thing.
Yeah.
Now you have to have the CMC1 card, then your commander has to resolve, it has to stick to the board for a whole turn, and then you can profit, right? So
with no protection.
Exactly. Lots of ifs.
I don't like the concept of playing this card, especially like comparing it to Aminatou. This does get around Graveyard Hate with its ability.
Yes, it does.
But most of the discard cards, they're bad in the decks. If you don't have a good lineup, then you want to be playing like this card works with what's it called?
Tortured Existence?
The one that untaps lands.
The one that taps lands?
Untaps lands. The instant speed, 3 mana.
Frantic Search.
Frantic Search. Yeah, there we go. So Frantic Search works with this as well.
Yeah,
but
true.
Yeah, like the Tainted Indulgences are the other cards that are good on this deck, and if that's what you're playing, then you're doing it turn 5, and that's not good enough.
Right. That's very late.
Casting this as a 1/3, the great thing about Aminatou is that you play it and you're still blanking creature removal. There's a lot of CMC-based creature removal that is kind of around in the format, lightning bolts and furies and stuff like that, and the aggro decks are very happy to disrupt that game plan with the 1 CMC cards that they're playing. And those are the cards that can, most of the time, kill Hashaton.
Yeah.
So playing it out as your like Hail Mary, I get to untap with this at some point card is just, I don't think it's gonna work most of the time. And if that's the case, then probably not going to replace Aminatou. But it's definitely an interesting card, and it goes in a different direction.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it plays well around Graveyard Hate.
Yeah, that's true. I think I would like to see this as a deck in Duel Commander, to be fair, because as you might know, with Peregrine Drake, for example, and Torch of Existence, this one represents an infinite 4/4 Peregrine Drake combo. It would be cool to have a card like Peregrine Drake back in the format. Or I think the last time we played Peregrine Drake was in combination with Vanifa, the CMC4 Simic commander that is banned for quite some time. And I just like the card from Pauper.
Yeah.
Back then. Would be cool to have something like this. We will see. Maybe players can come up with something. Maybe in the end it proves not to be too good and people will just ignore it, so to say. I mean, now if Ketramose is dominating the format and these graveyard-based strategies are slowly vanishing, then maybe this finds a slot since, as you said, it dodges Graveyard Hate somewhat. Then again, it's this card can be cut down. You know, this is my new standard for evaluating how fragile a creature is. Since back then we always said, yeah, it's boltable, it's not boltable. Ezio in comparison, you could even shock it with in red deck wins or Unholy Heat or whatsoever. This one you can bolt, but cut down is not the best black removal. This one can be cut down. That's sort of my new measure for, yeah, as I said, how fragile a card basically is. So I think almost anything deals with this card. We will see. I'm excited about it, but I'm not too optimistic. Let's say it like this.
Yeah.
Next up, a cool card, as I think, the Webstrike Elite. Interesting ability. Not too sure if it sees that much play. The first thing I said to Samuel is, one day we will make another Tribal Wars with Grist as an insect leader. And here we have, I think, the third or fourth useful insect in a 99.
Yeah, playable insect. Yeah. This card is cool. I think it's interesting in formats where you're sideboarding against something like Urza Saga.
Yeah.
Where it's instant speed, draw a card, kill Urza Saga. But in a kind of 100 card format where that's not usually going to be the case, this card occupies a weird slot because turn 2, you don't know if the opponent is going to have something that you want to kill with it. So if you're just playing it out turn 2, then you've got a 3/3 reach, which is okay.
Yeah.
But if you're holding it, then it might, get worse as the game progresses. I think the kind of Cankerbloom or what's it called? Ulvenwald Tracker?
No. How's the card called? I know which one you're talking about. Yeah, the one with Daybound, right?
The one with Daybound, yeah. So there is, I think, and there's a couple of other effects like this Haywire Might and stuff.
Yeah.
Where you get to deploy it onto the battlefield and then use it as a body. And if you need to sack it, Cathar Commando, those kind of effects are much better, in my opinion, than the cycling ability, because once it's on the battlefield, you've decided, okay, I'm not going to need the cycling ability. And if it turns out that you do need the cycling ability, then you're kind of fucked.
Yeah.
So,
and also, what's a big problem here is the fact that, in comparison to the cards you just mentioned, for Cankerbloom and Haywire Might and whatsoever, you always have to pay 1 mana in addition to the casting cost of the creature in order to get rid of the artifact or enchantment. Here, you actually have to pay 2 plus the CMC. So let's say the cycling would cost 3 mana in total, no matter the CMC of the target. This would maybe be an answer, also more or less uncounterable against, for example, removing a Parallax Wave, a Parallax Tide against Aether, whatsoever. This would be okay. Yeah, it's not the best removal, but still we draw a card, we get rid of it, and our opponent can't really interact with it. So that would be fine. But here, like paying 6 to get rid of the Parallax Wave is basically, you can't really do that. So I think that's more of a bigger problem here. And also a 3/3 reach, as you said, is cool, but it's not the best. Let's be fair. And also for double pips, not always easy to cast. If you're looking at the 3-color decks, for example, that maybe want to occupy that. But yeah, let's see. I think we will see it every now and then, or people will definitely try it out and then maybe quickly figure out it's not too crazy. Because, yeah, it's more of a sideboard card, as you said. I mean, it fits the theme, right? There are a lot of vehicles in the set. So if you're drafting and you're playing standard, this card is probably very well suited in your sideboard, or maybe even in the main board. But for single format, it's slightly too weak.
Yep.
Let's glide over to the next Voyager vehicle. At first, it doesn't look too crazy. We have a 2/3 vehicle, a white vehicle actually, that has a ETB. We don't have that too often. Squire 1 is nice. And then you can either activate it or crew it with a power 1 creature or by tapping 3 creatures. And then it even gets bigger. I think this card is a cool addition to, definitely a cool addition to Ratchet, if someone is still tinkering with the deck in 2025. Apart from that, it could fit into more aggressive strategies. So if I think about Failure, for example, you have a couple of 1 mana, 1 power creature, one power creatures, something like Thraben Inspector or Novice Inspector and stuff like this. They don't really add a lot of pressure to the board. Those could be used to crew this guy. Then again, the sequencing is a bit awkward because usually on turn 2 you want to play your dog. Don't waste the triggered ability to crew a creature. So that might not be the correct deck for this. But for example, if we go back to maybe Boros Gut in the future, I'm not sure if Gut will ever see time again in Duel Commander. But for these kinds of decks, it's maybe more suitable. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a cool card. I think there's a modern Collector's Cage deck which tries to cast Emrakul or Cavalry with the Collector's Cage, and this card slots pretty well into that. And there's always potential for a commander to be printed that goes really well in the go wide side of white, which hasn't been around yet, but there's always for potential for that card to come out. And if it does, then this card would probably slot pretty well into this. We have a lot of 2 mana spells in white that create 2 tokens, and the Lingering Souls or the Spectral Possession or like these sorts of effects where, if you have a couple of anthems in play or something like that, then but there's not going to be any haste givers in those sorts of decks, and then this deck can kind of use that pretty well, and having a vehicle in play for, in case the opponent board wipes you, this card kind of plays around those board wipes pretty well.
Yeah.
So there's potential for there to be a deck that this is included in. I think currently that's probably not the case.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, if I think about it, maybe there's a cool, not the best, but a cool lineup with Akiri, where you cast the vehicle turn 1 and then you crew it turn 2 with Akiri and attack with it. Maybe in some more aggressive variants that feature Akiri, this might find a home. We will see. We will see. It's definitely a cool one drop, I think. Let's get over to one of the most powerful commanders that was printed in a while, apart from Tamiyo and all the cards we got from Modern Horizons 3, okay. But Ketramose is a legend we briefly talked about in our update together with Flavion. So the format update we recently held. And we definitely have to talk about it today. Both of us were tinkering with a pile. We had some testing sessions already. It's a powerful card, powerful effects, and
the deck kind of seems a little bit stronger than it is on paper. No, the other way around. It seems a little bit stronger on paper than it is in real life. I think it plays very it's an absolute nightmare matchup for Yoshi. And there's a couple of decks like for Red Deck Wins and stuff like this where there's a couple of matchups with this is very powerful against. I think also its presence in a metagame that has done a lot of graveyard abuse to the point where we've seen Reanimate banned recently, where I think the council sort of recognized that the amount of value that we're gaining with graveyard, with the sack elementals and stuff like that, is getting a little bit too much, and it's out tempoing the format a bit. And I think having a commander in the metagame that interacts with graveyards a lot is probably going to be positive, but I think we'll see. I think we'll have to see. Our testing initially was very strong. We may or may not have misread the card a little bit, and our most recent testing was not as successful, but it's still definitely a powerful deck. And yeah, I think
there are a couple of difficult matchups. I mean, that's it's not like it has like a 80-20 win percentage against all the decks, but I think the defining facts are definitely that it will change the metagame and push out all the graveyard-based things, reanimator strategies, Slamfoot, Flage. We said it already. Second thing is, I guess, although this deck will have matchups that it's hard to beat, there are other matchups that basically, as you said, have no chance against it. So the card will be, in the command zone, will be very polarizing. And this might, in the end, be a problem because, of course, for a deck like Yoshi, or I'm not even sure about the Kellen or Felden matchup. I think neither of us has played the Red Deck Wins matchup so far. And I think it might be a bit more tricky in real life as we imagine. I think it's still in favor of Ketramose, but still it's not as easy as Yoshi might be.
Yeah.
Those decks have their predators. That's normal. But
yeah. But I mean, considering they're like, just kind of thinking about the matchup from the Ketramose perspective, basically all the cards you play are going to be relevant, like very relevant in the matchups, and pretty fast. Like
absolutely,
your curve is pretty low.
Yeah.
So I think there's very rarely are you going to have issues with Red Deck Wins.
I mean, the thing is that you're actively contributing to Red Deck Wins game plan by losing life, right? That's the thing.
Yes.
We have to talk about. But then again, you draw lots of answers, and you eventually get to a stage. If your opponent does not manage to bring down a Screaming Nemesis and prevents you from gaining life, that you will gain back life with just simply attacking with a creature. So,
and you can also wait till you have 7 cards in exile.
Sure.
Does pretty naturally.
Yeah.
And then cast your commander, and then you have a 4/4 lifelink indestructible.
Yeah.
Which to most Red Deck Wins strategies barely have any answers to that. Even if a Screaming Nemesis attacks and you have to block it with Ketramose, that's still a life neutral interaction for you because you gain the 4 life before the trigger resolves on the Nemesis, and then you might be able to tempo out the game. But also the deck plays a million exile removals, which should be able to take care of the Screaming Nemesis before it manages to trigger.
Yeah. Always depends on the timing, but in general it should be possible.
Yeah. And for cards like I think the Mesmeric Fiends and the Deep Cavern Bats and stuff, they're pretty good against Red Deck Wins as well, because if they want their card that it took back, they're going to have to bolt it usually, which means that they lose that on a tempo and card advantage front as well.
Yeah. To be fair, we have to say that there are 2 versions running around currently. So there's a more mid-rangey variant that we're trying out, featuring the 2 mana exile things. And then there is like a control variant. I think the perfect list is not yet found, but we will get there in a short time, I think. There are lots of events in the upcoming weeks, so players will definitely tinker with the deck, and we will see how this evolves.
Yeah.
Next up, we have the Broodheart Engine this way. Not the most spectacular card, to be fair, but as you know, or as you might know, I've played Winter recently. And this is obviously the perfect card for the deck. It fills my graveyard. It is an artifact if it's milled with any other effect, and it brings a reanimation effect with itself.
And it also filters your draws.
It also filters my draws. Sure. There's also Old Rootstein, which could make use of this card. Of course, it's not as good as in Winter, but still. The downside of this card is that the reanimation effect is quite costly, and also you telegraph that you have something. So your opponent basically just needs to prepare for graveyard interaction to get rid of the target, and then you basically wasted 4 mana for doing nothing. So in total it costs 6. That's quite costly, as I said. But I will definitely give this card a try, and I think Rootstein players will also give it a try. Maybe it's not that good over there. Then again, you have your upkeep trigger with Rootstein, in addition to the Surveil here, which both are upkeep triggers, so might even be more attractive in regards to the Surveil trigger, because you can decide whether or not you want to have a card milled with Rootstein, because you need maybe you need a land mill to have like an additional treasure token, stuff like this. Like manipulating your Rootstein trigger with the help of this trigger might be attractive.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a card that we see the black-green reanimator archetype every now and then. We saw the old Rootstein list, we saw some Grist lists. Now Winter probably is the best version of those lists, like currently.
It depends. I wouldn't say so, because Rootstein is taking the combo route, like with the Broodlord combo and the Raza kit. That's something that I don't really want to occupy in Winter. So that's two different types of decks, I would say, with slightly different focuses.
Yeah, and I think most of those decks are going to be on hiatus for now.
Yeah,
considering Ketramose, but after there's a resolution to Ketramose, either because the card is too bad and doesn't see much play, or the committee does something about it because it's too powerful. Those are possible options, and I think we're just going to have to wait and see.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then we can probably try to experiment with or get back into graveyard strategies.
Yeah. Next up, as you see, we have a lot of legendary creatures this time. 4 commanders in total, I think. We have a new Homunculus, which doesn't necessarily make for a great commander itself. It brings the new ability we talked about, or we briefly mentioned earlier on. Start Your Engines is definitely designed for standard. It takes quite long to reach the max speed. I said to Samuel earlier, I definitely see this card in Plagon. It brings basically a 4/4 buddy. You can activate the speed at turn 2 earliest. If your opponent somewhat handles the card, there are a few reanimation spells. Not too many, but still, we have Formal Wear, we have Helping Hand. Some people even play the one from Modern Horizons 2, I think. No, 3 it is, with the energy tokens, because the deck plays a lot of CMC2 creatures. So, what I'm going to say is the max speed replacement effect is definitely a win more ability. If you can make use of it, it's crazy. You're already drawing a lot of cards with Plagon. You draw even more cards with Plagon to solidify your board state or game state or whatsoever. Apart from that, as a commander, drawing cards is nice, but you don't you're dependent on a second card or anything else to finish a game, right? Because a 0/4, I would imagine people will try this out. People will experiment with the card. I'm pretty sure about that. Because, in the command zone, you can play it. You start your engine. Your opponent handles it somewhat. Later on, you can bring it back, and then you have max speed while dealing with whatever your opponent brought up. So you're drawing more cards, but you have to draw into something to actually impact the game.
Yeah. I looked at Start Your Engines, and I misinterpreted it the first time I read it. I thought for some reason, I saw some cards spoiled with it and there wasn't a reminder text on them, so I thought maybe it works like you have to trigger start your engines X times, and if you trigger it 4 times on different cards, then you're at speed 4, which would probably be better than the way it is now. And or if like you play another card with start your engines, you still go up 1 speed.
The way that the initiative is working, you mean, right?
Yeah, the way that the initiative works, I think that would be more competitively viable. Right now, I think it's one of those. I think it's basically just a draft mechanic.
Yeah.
Where I don't really see many games where you realistically get to max speed at a time where it's relevant, right? So if you play even in a red deck, probably in a red deck, you're gonna have the ability to get to max speed as fast as you can, and even if you start your engines on turn 1 and do damage to the opponent, then you still only have max speed turn 4.
Yeah.
Well, end of turn 3, but turn 4 is when you are going to be able to utilize your max speed.
And that's quite late, to be fair.
And that's just too late for these sorts of effects. And being on a 0/4 creature, you still have to, like, if you have this card in your command zone, your ideal draw is like a Spectral Sailor or some other form of 1/1 turn 1, and then you cast your commander turn 2. You don't have any mana to interact with something that tries to remove your 1/1, and then you're hoping to get to max speed soon. But if the opponent interacts with what you're doing, then your game plan is also slowed down. So you can't really commit to brewing with the stipulation, and that makes it just worse than most other mono blue commanders, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
definitely,
it's unfortunate to see kind of the slot for an entire ability on a set be wasted on something that's not really competitively viable. But we'd love to be proven wrong there, or I'd love to be proven wrong. If it's possible and it works, then I think it's a pretty cool ability flavor wise. I just don't think it has the potential to work well.
I think so. I agree. That's also why we didn't really decide to talk about the new Azorius commander. I think the Azorius pool is not big enough to go for 100 card singleton affinity game plan. I mean, there are definitely some cards. I don't want to deny that, but I think it's not enough. And also, in the light of Akiri, I think people are more focused on building Akiri instead of having just Azorius.
I mean, the Azorius Legend might make it into an Akiri deck.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely part of the 99, but as a standalone commander, I think it's not good enough, to be fair. But let's move over to the last card. For today, we have the Skyserpent Seeker. A card that is not too crazy. Then again, Flying Death Touch, an Ice Fang Quaddle that doesn't draw a card at first. And later on, you have the Mana Sink, which is not too bad, to be fair. I could think about this card in Atraxa.
Yes.
Or maybe in Niv-Mizzet.
That's where I would place it in my mind as well. I haven't seen a Niv-Mizzet in like a year, so I'm not sure about that. But I think in Atraxa, where even if you play it turn 6, even like if it hasn't been relevant you haven't been able to play it, or you draw it pretty late. If you play it turn 6 and you leave that ability open, you can play it, either block with it, or the opponent kills it, or you just do it. You go up to 8 lands, you play your 9th land, and then you have Atraxa with a counter backup.
Yeah, right. Which is pretty powerful.
Which is pretty powerful. So I think this card might slot into those decks. Also because, it's a 2-mana 1/1 that opponents basically have to kill before you get to 4 mana. And if you do get to 4 mana, then you can just activate it right away. And 2 lands is very valuable.
Yes.
at the rate that we've had it before, with kind of like, what's it called, explosive vegetation and Sky Shroud Claim, that kind of 4 mana, get 2 lands from your library and put them into play. This is a little bit worse than that because it gets random lands. It doesn't fix your colors. It also is a 4 generic ability, so it might fix your colors in those situations. Yeah, I like this card. I like the thought of this card. I hope that it finds its place, because in decks that are looking to, like, for example, this might find its place in loot.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, true. Yeah.
If playing mountains and having mountains in play and using the lightning bolt ability on the Valakut is kind of what we're looking to do in that deck, then this might be the card that gets us there.
Yeah. There's one more aspect to the card that I think is quite relevant. Maybe not too relevant anymore since White Plume Adventure is banned, but this one is like Flying and Death Touch is quite a good combination to steal some emblems.
Yes.
Like you have like a offensive upside of having a flying creature. You have a defensive upside of having a Death Touch creature. It's a pretty good combination. We all know that because there's Baleful Strix and sometimes there's Icefang Quaddle already around. But okay, let's be fair. The Icefang Quaddle only has Death Touch if you control 3 or more snow-covered permanents, right? Or 3 other snow-covered permanents. So it's not as good as a Baleful Strix, obviously. But yeah, I totally agree to the points that you said regarding this guy. Definitely would like to play it here and there myself. Would also fit in a deck like how was it called? Slowgurk, for example, the Simic lands commander.
Yep.
Basically doing like an Azusa with Mono Blue edition, if you so will, and having like a big commander that grows with more and more lands that are leaving your graveyard. I think it was. Not entirely sure about that. But yeah, cool card. I think we will definitely see it in Atraxa, and I have played against some Nif Mizzets in 2024. So to me, I've seen them every now and then. There's a more or less famous French player that is playing Nif Mizzet on a regular basis, as far as I know. So
okay.
I think we will definitely see it. And yeah, maybe, as you said, loot is another pile to include the snake.
Yeah.
Cool. With that, we're at the end of our AETHERDRIFT review.
Tell us any cards that we missed.
Yeah, definitely. We can debate in the comments about further cards. As always,
you have these new sets come out, and sometimes you're reading, what is it, 250 cards plus the commander cards, 291 cards plus everything else that's coming out, plus all the special art versions. What we didn't comment on, which kind of deserves a comment, is AETHERDRIFT is completing the Verge cycle.
Yes, true that.
That's very cool. I really like, a cycle of lands being introduced and being finished very quickly.
Yep.
It happened with the ones that come in untapped as if they're your third land, and afterwards that cycle got finished very quickly.
The slow lands, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, the slow lands, as opposed to, fast lands took, I think, like 7 years to get finished.
Yeah.
We're still waiting on the battle lands. We're still waiting on the cycle duels.
There are a couple
to get finished, and I don't like, some color combinations having more or better lands than other color combinations.
Yeah.
I think that's something that should be kind of equally distributed and evenly distributed. So
True.
That's a very cool thing that's happening. Yeah.
Yes. Apart from that, as Samuel said, debate in the comments about more cards. It's very likely that we missed another card because, like 300 cards looking through. This time I took some time and read most of the cards from the spoiler. But maybe there's another card that we forgot and that's also relevant for our format or for Magic overall. Feel free to let us know. With that being said, thanks for tuning in and see you in the next session.
See you next time.